Okay, so guys, like I said, there's no one way of cutting out everything, so we're going to take a look at various ways of extracting things from backgrounds and combining them together. Some things we've already taken a look at, like channel masking. We'll go a little bit deeper into that. And the lab will be for you guys to make some of your own kind of composite images. So let's start, guys. Take a look on the screen for a second. Let's say you wanted to cut this out and put it onto a different background. There's a whole bunch of ways that it could be done. We've taken a look at things like the Quick Select tool, which basically you paint over whatever color you want to select. So there's a couple ways you could go about it. You could say, well, I want to select this flower, so I'll select the flower. You guys remember we took a look at some really basic selection tools like the lasso tool, marquee tool, things like that. We looked at the magic wand. How does the magic wand work? Well, if you click on something, let's say I grab the magic wand here, and it hides out with the Quick Select tool. So if you click and hold, you'll get that fly out. And if I were to click on this red here, I've got a tolerance of 32, so it said, select whatever I clicked on, and anything that's within 32 levels from that 0 to 255 grayscale range, anything within 32 levels, include that in the selection. I could add to the selected area. If I hold down the Shift key, you can see I get this Add to Selection. I could work my way through, but it would take a long time to get all the different tones that are in this flower. The Quick Select tool works a bit differently. I just click and I drag across. Anything that my tool passes over gets included in the selection. So if I start at the bottom here, I click in the yellow, it selects the yellow. I move to the green, it selects the green. If I go up here, we get the red, and that all gets included. Are auto selection tools the best way to make selections? They're the fastest. Are they always going to get you the best, most accurate? Not necessarily, but there are ways of cleaning them up. With the Quick Select, things can go a little bit awry. If I wanted to, well, first off, you notice that it selected that top part up there. I only wanted this flower selected, but it grabbed, for some reason, this bit over here. I can subtract. If I hold down the Option key, or if I click on this little minus icon over here, I can subtract from the selected area. The problem with using the fast ways of doing things is you tend to miss bits. And you'll see it as you kind of get more familiar with cutting things out in, catalogs, areas. You'll see it in ads and stuff where things got missed. I often get assignments where people have used like, Magic Wand or Quick Select, and you get these kind of jaggy edges where something gets missed. And look at what happened on this thing here. It's a red flower. There's another red flower behind it, and where I tried to subtract, it got a little confused about where the edge was down here. This is the kind of thing that if I used a layer mask to hide that background, and watch this, when I click the new layer mask icon, boink, the background simply disappears. Because I had this flower selected, whenever you have an active selection, you can see those marching ants around there, and you add a new layer mask, it uses the selection as a layer mask. But look, there's a little bump on the edge of this flower here. The selection is not horrible. If I look at the layer mask, it's not that bad of a cutout. But there is that little bump on the end. Is a layer mask a permanent, non-changing thing that you can't work on afterwards? Yeah, you can always paint on it. If I grabbed a paintbrush and I took some black paint, because it's black in the background here, well, first off, it missed this bit up here. I can just paint over that. And that little bump there, as long as I match the softness of the edge, like this brush here, okay, well, that edge is obviously a little bit too soft. If I take a bit of a smaller brush, whenever I'm cutting things out, I always leave the hardness of my brush set to 0, and then I change the hardness by changing the size of my brush. So we can use that to cut off that little bump there. Or if you do the shift clicking technique, we can do a shift click and boink, we can cut across that way. And that removes that little bump on the edge. Another way that I find is a good way of cutting things out, let me just delete that layer mask. I'm going to give this a new layer mask, take a paintbrush, and by simply painting with black, I could cut my way out around this flower here. Now, the softness of the brush, like I said, when you're working in a photograph, there are no hard edges. You'll never see something where the object ends at this pixel and the background begins at this pixel. There's always this transition here. And the size of the brush, when you've got the hardness set to 0, determines the softness. So right now, this is obviously too soft of a brush. I can see a bit of the background showing, and I'm getting some partial transparency along the edge of the flower. So I can just change the size of the brush until the hardness of the brush matches. And if I'm going to use this manual technique, I can just click, I can start cutting out around. If I get to a long straight edge, I can hold down the Shift key. Remember with Shift, it jumps in between the areas that you click on. Now the nice thing about using this technique, the softness of that edge can change. Like I said, there's no hard edges, there's always a bit of softness there, and this seems to be an appropriate hardness on the edge there. Excellent, I can shave off the background. But if I go further down, oh, look at that. This is a bit of a harder edge now. Now this is too soft. I need to change the size of my brush to match the hardness of that edge. Now that's not something you can do. The Quick Select would get a fairly hard edge around the outside, And if you wanted to soften it to match the softness of the top part of the flower, well, you'd over soften this area down here. Same deal with the pen tool. A lot of people like cutting things out with the pen tool. And like we said before, if you're doing something for like, the Metro catalog, or, you're cutting out shampoo bottles or whatever, stuff that's all evenly in focus, it can do a great job on those curves fairly fast. You can load that up as a selection. You could use that to create a layer mask. But let's say you would photograph, say, a still life, a bowl of fruit, and in the center you got some grapes in there, and you're focused on those, so those have nice hard edges, nice small brush to get that hard edge around the outside. But then towards the back of the bowl, there's some apples, and in the front of the bowl, there's some oranges, and they're outside the depth of field, so they're a bit softer. If you use the pen tool to cut them out, you could do a great job around the grapes. You could go around the apples, kind of, estimate, the center of that blur around there. And say, okay, well, I'll just, feather the selection once it's made. Feather it for the apples. Well, now the blur on the grapes is too much. So using this technique, you know that you're getting a perfect cutout everywhere you go because you're actually looking at it as you create that cutout. And if the softness of the edge changes, you can simply change the size of your brush to match the softness of that edge. So masking by hand, there's always something good to be said for that. Now there are times where it's not going to work. Like someone has like some really fluffy hair with a lot of flyaways going out into the background. You're not going to be able to mask that by hand. What might be another way of getting somebody's really fluffy hair included in a selection? You guys remember channel masking? Yeah, you can use a channel mask. You could try quick select, and then we could use the select and mask options. So we're going to take a look at a bunch of those today. So see if you can get that flower cut out onto a transparent background. Give you some time to work on that. Call this up, and you can try a quick select. You can try just using a pure layer mask. See if you can cut it around this flower and get it floating on its own transparent background. Yes? Guys, take a look on the screen for a second. Do my flowers look different than yours? What's the difference? I got extra flowers in there, don't I? And look at this. How do you think I did that? Let's take a look here. So I got my selection here. Let me just throw these flowers here. Oh, actually, look, before we do it, let's take a look at these flowers that I cut out here. Is that a good cutout on those blue flowers in the background? No. No. Look at. Oh, like I said, every technique has its ups and downs, and this would be one of the downs in there. I'll show you in a minute how I did that, but let's just quickly run through what the process that I went through was. Once I had a selection of this flower, I used the quick select, selected the flower, used the option to unselect that, gave it a layer mask. There was another image in that folder called 007, which is these flowers here. And how do you think I selected these guys? I could have used the color range, but the first one I tried was the quick select. So I made my way around and basically just kind of painted them in. Okay, I missed a bit there, but you get the idea. Now here's the thing. Oops. Okay, and that was a really bad job. Let me just try again. So make my way through. What we got in here? Like I said, each one has its ups and downs, and the contrast in here it got confused about what was what. There's another way we could try selecting this. Do you guys remember the color range command? Select, color range. It lets you select a range of colors. And to start, you'll notice you've got that little eyedropper there, this little eyedropper guy. And if I were to click somewhere, say I clicked on this flower, it would say, okay, I'm going to select whatever you clicked on. If I click on these orange flowers, I'm going to select the orange flowers. If I click on these little guys here, select these little guys here. But there's a lot that's not getting selected. Okay, I could bring the fuzziness up. This is a lot like the tolerance on the magic wand. Here it's only selecting anything within 17 levels of what I clicked on. I can bring that way up until the flowers are all selected pretty much, except, uh-oh, I'm starting to get some stuff down there. Clearly that fuzziness is too high. What could I do to get some of these other areas included in the selection? Yeah, this little plus sign eyedropper. I'll add to the colors that have been sampled that I'm telling it to include. So I can see that these flowers here aren't getting very well selected. So I can either click on them over here, or I can even click inside this little window here. So, we're not getting that one there. I'll click on it. That also gets added to the tones that are being included in the selection. And again, I can play around with this fuzziness until it's not including anything else. And in theory, when I hit OK, I should have a selection that represents those flowers. And it did a better job, yes, down around in here, okay, because it was going for the blue. With quick select, it's whatever you dragged over, and I dragged over this, and it started getting some of this. It didn't know how far to come out. It was a bit of a mess. So is this a perfect selection?
Can you expand?
If I expanded it, select, modify, expand, it would jump outwards. Let's say I did 5 pixels, and now I've got a little border around the outside of these flowers. That's just kind of weird looking. I could pull it inwards, but look what's going on around in here. You know what? Let's make this into a layer mask. Remember, we have an active selection. Let's give it a layer mask. Okay, we can see some problem areas. We can see some little, well, look at the middle of this flower here. If we hold down the Shift key, watch this. There's a layer mask which is hiding the background. Anything that's black is being hidden. If I hold down the Shift key and click on that layer mask, it temporarily disables it. By shift-clicking on a layer mask, it temporarily disables it. And I can look in and go, oh yeah, look at that. That's supposed to be solid the whole way through. Okay, well, what do I do to make that visible? Yeah, paint some white. Grab a paintbrush. Uh-oh, I got black selected here. Do I even have black selected? Maybe that's a really dark gray. Maybe I would switch it around to white and then start painting and it wouldn't quite bring it back. How do I make sure I have pure black and pure white as my foreground and background? D on the keyboard, excellent. And then I start painting with, 50% opacity. Maybe I didn't check how do I make sure I have 100% opacity? And I can just bring that part back. So we can clean up little problematic areas in there. Here's an interesting little tip. How do I make this layer mask visible? Yeah, hold down the Option key, click boink, right on the layer mask, and if I zoom in here, look at that. I can see some gray tones in there. Now that is probably not that obvious at this point, but if I put this onto a background that, say, was like a really dark background or a really light background, this would be partially transparent. These little bits of gray through here. How could I clean all this up to make sure I have pure white in here? I could take a paintbrush and I could paint it in, but well, we got it all around here. That'd be a pain, wouldn't it? Levels. If I go under Image, Adjustments, Levels, oh, look at this little spike over here, this little ramp. This is that really bright tonality around these areas. If I pull this down, look at how it cleans that right up. And there's probably some little gray bits. Oh, well, there will be areas I need to do it by hand, but there's probably some gray bits in the shadows that I could clean up like that as well. There's before, and there's after. So you can see it really kind of cleaned up a lot of those highlights, especially around these edges. So I don't need to worry about these anymore. So now it's just kind of cleaning up these little guys around here. And it doesn't matter whether you're looking at the layer mask itself. If you're looking at the layer mask, it makes it easy to see these little problem areas, but you can also do it while you're looking at the image. So play around with that, see if you can get those little flowers cut out. Now, if I wanted to drop these flowers in behind the flower on the other document, first off, how would I get them over there? Duplicate, yeah. I could copy and paste, and one of the reasons I used to say not to copy and paste was if I copied the flowers and pasted them over, it wouldn't take the layer mask with it. It actually does take the layer mask now. They've updated that in Photoshop. So if I were to choose Edit, Copy, go over to the other document, and choose Edit, Paste, look at that. It actually does take the layer mask now. Should you still do that? No, why? Use up your RAM. When you copy and paste, it adds those pixels to your computer's RAM. So instead of copying and pasting, duplicating the layer over kind of bypasses that whole RAM, that whole clipboard thing. So if we choose Duplicate Layer, and for destination, we'll choose 003. And when you pop over there, there's those flowers hanging out above that flower. I wanted it behind that flower. How do I get these so it looks like it's behind that hanging flower? Just change the stacking order. Grab it, drag it down below. Except I don't see the background of this flower. If I hold down the Shift key, again, I can disable that layer mask, but now I don't see those blue flowers. How can I make it look like those blue flowers are in between, like behind that flower in the background? Clipping would be interesting, but it wouldn't put it behind. Sorry? Not a blending mode. Well, what if I duplicated this flower's layer? Because remember, I used a layer mask, so that background is still there. It's just hidden by the layer mask. And if I put that at the bottom of the stack, what would happen if I held down the Shift key and clicked on that layer mask? It would temporarily disable the layer mask, wouldn't it? So the background is nicely in place. Right behind this flower, the background is just kind of hiding out behind this flower that's right over top of itself. So now it looks as though these flowers are actually in behind them. Okay, I didn't do a great job of catching all these little things in here. But the nice thing about layer masks is I could go back in and fix that up later. Plus, the other nice thing about layer masks, remember this point on the flower up here? Didn't notice it when it's over here because this point, this little bubble was over top of itself, but there, there's that problem. Figure out which mask it's on if you need to use the eyeball there. If you're having trouble figuring out what layer a problem's on, just turning the eyeball off and on can often make it a little bit more visible. Grab that black paintbrush and I can just clean up that edge. The nice thing about these layer masks is they're always editable. You can always go in and paint to reveal, paint to hide. If you've accidentally gotten rid of something, you just use some white paint and bring it back. Okay, so that was, kind of interesting, kind of moderately useful.